there are two kinds of activities that you can engage in that will for sure raise your verbal score, but you can expect different types of results. So the first one is based on the idea that making the right decision during the test is an intersection of three things: the text, the question, and the answer choice. So the first thing that you would have to do if you're struggling to choose between two answer choices is to realize that because I'm struggling and I cannot make a choice, it means that I've gone wrong either reading the text, the question, or the answer choices, one of them, two of them, or all of them. And the first step you have to take is to reread the question, because it's the easiest thing to do. So maybe you were trying to weaken the conclusion, but then the question was asking you to strengthen the conclusion. And so you realize, like, wait a minute, I was doing the wrong thing. And maybe that would help you choose either A or B. Maybe you do that and then you're still struggling, you don't know whether it's A or B. Well, what you do in that case is to read again the paragraph and to make sure that you have identified the key point or the essence of whatever it is that they're saying. And you need to use structures. So there are some common ones that always reappear on the exam, and they're premise, conclusion, cause, effect, plan, outcome, situation, hypothesis. Now, sometimes within one structure, you can have another structure. For example, a premise conclusion, the conclusion could be a cause effect, a claim someone is making, that this is the cause, this is the effect. If you do not do this, if you do not identify the structure, you really risk just having a lot of ideas vague, dispersed throughout your mind, and you won't be able to concentrate and realize that this is the idea that matters as you are reading the question and contrasting that idea against the question and the answer choices. And you might as well be just shooting in the dark. Now, this is based on this principle that our working memory is very limited, and for you to be able to really manage the information and make the right decision, all those ideas that are relevant have to overlap inside that limited working memory. And that is why it's so important in this exam to be able to understand the things in your own words, to encapsulate the big ideas in very few words. So that act of reducing all this information into very few words, that is the hardest thing that you would have to do to improve your score. And I talk about that in the second set of activities. But for the moment, when you're going through the checklist, you have to make sure that, okay, read the question, check, and then read the text and make sure that you identified the idea that matters. And then the last step that you would do in that checklist is to paraphrase the answer choices. Now, why is it important to paraphrase the answer choices? Because sometimes when we read certain words, our mind is anchored on a certain interpretation. Now, even though that interpretation may be incorrect, we can't realize that when we reread the words. So as we are rereading the answer choices, we're not actually reparsing the text and forcing ourselves to identify the actual meaning. And to actually be able to do that, to just reboot or to reset the meaning in your memory, is to paraphrase the answer choice. So you force your mind to reinterpret the words again. The other thing that you can do is to translate to your native language. Sometimes it really helps. It forces you to really pay attention and perhaps recognize that key detail or key word that you had missed that was relevant to answering the question. For example, there was a quantifying word, or maybe there's an adjective that you missed. Sometimes it's really that precise. And so once you've gone through this checklist, you may go, aha, okay, now I understand that that is actually the correct answer choice, or that is the incorrect answer choice, and then you eliminate it. And if you go through this checklist and you realize that, I don't know, I'm just still confused between these two answer choices, then maybe that is the moment for you to realize that you've done all you could. And in that particular moment in the exam, there's nothing more you can do. So you guess and move on. So this checklist helps you to improve your accuracy, but it also serves as a very helpful time management strategy because you've done all you could, and so it's time to guess and move on. Now, the second set of activities that you need to engage in to raise your verbal score are more difficult, but the return on your investment is going to be higher, and it requires a lot of patience. So there are three things that you can work on. Number one, your ability to comprehend the English language and the speed at which you can comprehend the English language. So you have to improve the quality and speed of comprehension in the English language. That is really difficult to do. The second thing that you can do is to expose yourself to more of the contexts that appear on the exam. And number three is to improve your ability to choose the correct answer choice or to eliminate the incorrect answer choices using specific, explicit reasons based on sound verbal reasoning principles. And to do all of these things, it requires a lot of volume of a lot of high quality questions. Now, there's a strategy that some people recommend, which is to read a magazine like, for example, The Economist or the Financial Times, to read some books, some really good books. Obviously, this is the best strategy to improve your comprehension of the English language, but it's just something that takes a lot of time. And now is the time to actually do things that are more focused. So if you're planning to take the test within a year, reading books or articles is not going to provide you with the greatest return on your investment. Obviously, do some of that. There's always value in reading. But for the specific purpose of taking the exam and improving your score, you want to focus on questions that are very similar to the questions that appear on the exam. Now, to improve your ability to comprehend the English language and to improve your comprehension speed and quality, what you have to do is pay the tax. What that means is the following. When you're reading a large body of text, you have to force yourself to express the main idea of that body of text in 20 words or less. That act is very difficult, but that act is absolutely essential. You have to be able to read a lot of words and be able to say like, okay, so the point that this author is making is that. If you are not able to do this, there's just no point in learning hacks, learning tips, learning strategies, and there's going to be a cap on the kind of progress that you can make. So that is the most difficult thing that you can do to improve your verbal score, but that is the act that will give you the largest returns. So reading a lot of information and being able to express that information in few words. And then as you read more information, so for example, you're reading paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4, as you are reading those paragraphs, and as you are stating that the main idea of this paragraph is ABC, and then the next paragraph, the main idea of this paragraph is CDE, and then adding those ideas together to paint the whole picture. So to be able to read 400 words, 500 words, and express the main idea of those words in 20 words or less. The second thing that you have to do is to familiarize yourself with the contexts that appear on the exam. Now, when you're reading or solving questions and you're looking at the information related to the exam, they say that prior knowledge is not required to answer those questions. And that is true to an extent, but it's a little bit misleading because imagine you have to read about something that you've never read about before. It's going to be very difficult for you to have that appreciation of the situations or the kinds of ideas that are related to that context. So if you're someone, let's say, who never studied physics, who never read about quantum theory, someone who's never read about plate tectonics, someone who's never read about the usage of fertilizer in soil, you don't know about photosynthesis, and you don't know about osmosis, you haven't read about supply and demand, you're someone who did not get exposed to a lot of the ideas that are important to engaging in serious debate, you're really going to struggle to realize the essence of whatever it is that they're asking. So it is true that you don't need prior knowledge to answer specific questions, and all the information contained to answer question is contained in the text, but it is not true that past knowledge doesn't really help. So the idea is context and being able to draw upon this large reservoir of experience that allows you to appreciate the ideas that are relevant to answer those questions. And so to improve your exposure to context, there's also no other alternative than to solve a lot of questions, a vast volume of questions. And that is going to be the most direct, efficient path for you to be able to expose yourself to as many contexts as you can that you can use on the day of the test. Now also there's this cultural reference that is included in a lot of these texts that if you also don't have, you will struggle. Now the third thing that you want to do is to learn how to eliminate the incorrect answer choices and choose the correct answer choice using very specific reasons. Now sometimes it may be enough to say that an answer choice is out because it's out of context, but in many cases that is not enough. And what you have to do is learn how to say that answer choice A is incorrect because it strengthens the argument and the question asks me to weaken the argument. Answer choice B is incorrect because it is relevant to a different conclusion, etc. So when you are able and when you develop your ability to eliminate the incorrect answer choices and to choose the correct answer choice using these specific reasons, and to learn how to do that under time conditions and to rehearse how to do that under time conditions, then your verbal score will really increase. Now, I want to remind you of the following. This exam is an exam. It's a test of habits. By habit, I mean that on the day of the test, it just goes by so fast that you don't really have a lot of time to deliberate or to introspect or to think deeply about things. If there is a required idea, strategy, skill, tactic, rule, theory that is required to answer a particular question, and if that is not something that you have as a habit, or if that is something that you had not already assimilated into your unconscious, it will be too late for you to be able to use it on the test. That's why, for example, cheat sheets are useless. A lot of students ask me, can I have a cheat sheet? Can I have a list of all the ideas they test in the exam? It's absolutely useless. If it is not something that is already hardwired into your unconscious, you will not be able to summon it on the day of the test. And so the idea is, when you're thinking about these explicit, deliberate, verbal reasoning principles that are required to answer a particular question, they have to have been formed as habits on the day of the test. And the only way that you can do that is through repetition of a lot of high volume questions, of a lot of high quality questions, until you are able to use those ideas, those theories, those principles, those rules without having to think about it. And you'll come to a point almost in the exam where you'll realize that you're really only reacting. So you're reading information, and whatever it is that is relevant to answer the question for a very large extent is really unconscious, right? You will just know what to do, having solved a lot of questions and developed the pattern recognition, and then sometimes on occasion you'll really have to slow down and pay attention and engage consciously with the question to really make sure that you've identified the right details. And that is when you will see that your verbal score will really shoot up. But that requires a lot of repetition and a lot of time you really thinking deeply about things, and then taking the time to review your errors and to understand why is it that you have to eliminate this answer choice, and why is it that you have to choose this answer choice. And then once you've identified these ideas that allow you to do that as you are reviewing a question, then you try to apply it on another set of questions. And you do this cycle, and you iterate this cycle many times, and that is why you need a high volume of questions. But when you do that on a large set of questions, you'll realize that the principles that you're invoking to be sure why the incorrect answer choices are incorrect and the correct answer choices are correct repeat. And so you'll have this arsenal of ideas that you can use on the day of the test. But what you have to remember is that these ideas have to become a habit through repetition. So these are the two kinds of activities that you can engage in to improve your verbal reasoning. So one of them is a checklist-based one. The other one is based on learning the habits required for efficient, explicit verbal reasoning, improving your comprehension quality and speed, and identifying contexts. I hope you found this video helpful. If you feel like I missed something, if you have any questions, please feel free to comment below.